get input from the governor-elect Nikki Haley? Is she aware of the agenda? Does she agree with these items? Does she agree to work with y'all on these?
Yes, we've talked with her back during the campaigns about the 5 agenda items that we laid out during the drive for 75, and we've talked to her since about many of these agenda items before we've announced them today.
Mr. Speaker, what specifically can you do to improve education, especially considering the almost certainty that education will have to be cut in some ways because of the budget situation?
Strengthening the Charter School Act, first of all, so that parents have more choices and that parents who want to become integrally involved even more so in their child's education are able to do so through that process is one of the first things we're going to put on the table. It's a bill that Representative Owen's been working on that will be bringing out of his committee, focusing on the education funding formula, which has been a couple of decades, maybe 3 decades since it's actually been addressed. Making sure that we fund education more equitably across the state is another huge item that we can do.
Speaker, with that charter school, or maybe this is a fair question for Representative Owens, with that charter school bill, that would allow some additional state funding for charter schools, correct?
The state funding would be on the same level as all public schools. It would allow local funding to also be included in the funding of charter schools, which is not currently being done.
So that would take away money from traditional schools?
It would not take away money from traditional schools. The money would actually follow the child should they choose the traditional public school route or a public charter school route. So the funding would actually go where the child is. So if the child is not served in the traditional public school, then the funds would not go to the school where the child is not being served, but would rather follow the child to the charter school.
And that concept dovetails nicely with the work that Chairman Cooper's doing on the funding reform, where money would be more following the child as opposed to being programmatic money sent out.
Speaker, since transparency and economic development is part of your agenda, will there be any move to make public Commerce Department documents in cases where incentives deals don't go through?
Documents from the Commerce Department ought to be public after a sufficient amount of time has passed to make sure that you don't hurt the deal that's in process or the possibility of reopening negotiations on the deal. Most of us, I certainly support making those documents public after that period of time has passed. I don't think you ought to make those public during a negotiation or shortly thereafter, because you always have the chance of coming back and reopening a negotiation. A great example of that would be Vaught and Elena, who built the fuselage down in Charleston, and then a couple of years later we followed it up by being able to get Boeing down there. I think it would not have been wise to let the folks in Everett, Washington see the negotiations that had occurred earlier to help them in their negotiations that occurred later. So I think making that information available to the public, once you know the deal is gone and you're not going to be able to participate and not be able to get that deal in the future, I think is fine. But I think you need to be very careful, and we need to protect Commerce's ability to negotiate on behalf of the state without tipping our hands to our competitors around the country.
Will you see legislation in that effect?
There isn't something listed on the agenda particularly, but it wouldn't surprise me to see legislation like that in the session.
Speaker, you mentioned that the House has already passed a lot of these, sometimes many times, so what's going to be any different this year?
I think as we get into a stronger awareness by the public on things that are going on up here in Columbia, the whole Tea Party movement and the whole increase in activity and interest by voters in this past election cycle, I think is a very good result of what's just happened in the election cycle, and I think it's going to get even bigger. That awareness of what's going on in Columbia is going to be even bigger as we move into the next election cycle, and I think that'll help us to get a number of these things on through the process. And I don't mean to keep talking and not have my majority leader or anybody else who wants to.
On illegal immigration reform, does that include a movement that was announced yesterday in Washington so that you're not an automatic citizen when you're born in the U.S.?
I don't know if that's in the bill. Do you know?
Let me point out one thing. On the agenda, if it wasn't made clear, we've got a name by each of the particular items to give the media a contact person for each of the items to ask specific questions, because this is a collaborative effort for everybody. However, let me try to answer the question. My understanding is that the illegal immigration bill that we put forth is similar to what's taking place in Arizona, which is basically just an enforcement of federal law. We don't determine citizenship or legality of someone being over here. So whatever Washington does, and we certainly encourage Washington to fix the problem because it is a federal issue to start with. We're just trying to do what we can in order to protect our borders the best we possibly can. And right now, Arizona and Oklahoma have come up with the best solutions, we believe, and we're going to try to follow suit.
And if you want more in-depth detail, Kenny's
Bedingfield.
right. Eric Benfield, whose name is on your list, is the person to call.
Well, that announcement yesterday, apparently a South Carolina Senate Republican was up there yesterday. Is that something that this state should be pursuing?
I'm not familiar enough with it, Shauna, to comment on what they did yesterday. I don't know.
I'm not familiar enough with it either.
I don't know I'm not sure what happened yesterday.
Okay. Other questions?
Of the proposals that the House hasn't already passed in previous years, what are the 2 or 3 new items on this agenda that you feel are most important, most significant for the state?
I'll let you answer that.
Well, let me look down through it real quickly because we've done most of them. Tort reform we passed before last year. Let's see, point of sale, we've done that. Charter school revision, I think we need to work on that. Everything on here is important, but I'm going down real quickly to make sure I don't miss anything. Our agency restructuring, we've done some, but we're going to expand the agency restructuring. Our taxpayer bill of rights is something that we're going to introduce that we believe is going to be important for our taxpayers.
Bill Wiley Entrepreneurship Act.
Our Bill Wiley Entrepreneurship Act. Let's see, our pro-life initiatives that we've got on there, 3 by Representative Delaney that we're going to be bringing forward.
Probably the newest things, Robert, to answer that, since Kenny just went through that, a couple of the economic development bills that we have are things that we haven't passed and have not passed through the House previously. The good news is economic development legislation is something we're generally able to get through both bodies, so I guess we've got a couple of new ideas here on economic development, and I expect the Senate would follow suit on those. Anything else?
Yeah, different elects issues would not make private school choice a priority, but would pass a bill without their desk. Can you tell me if the private school choice legislation can be any more of a priority for you guys than wasn't passed?
Well, we're here talking about the agenda that we have. I'm sure that a bill like that will be introduced, but our focus is on the 3 education items that we mentioned on the agenda. That's charter schools, the funding formula, and what's the third one I left out? Oh, those 2, and transparency, college transparency.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Given that unemployment is so important in the state right now, the rates are incredibly high, which of these agenda items do you think will have the most direct and immediate impact on improving that situation?
I think all of them in totality. If you just look this past year, South Carolina was ranked in the top 10 in terms of business-friendly states in like 15 different categories, which makes us very competitive and business-friendly. That's what you see when the attraction of Boeing. The only way that unemployment is going to remove itself is by South Carolina growing its economy and having jobs come and the economy come back. So everything we do to improve the economy, such as tort reform, while on the surface you may say that's not important, when you look at the reason that we are ranked so high in the business categories by all these different ranking agencies nationwide, it's because of the work that we've done on tort reform, that we've done on workers' comp reform, that we've done on insurance legislation, on right-to-work laws. All of the things that in themselves may not appear singularly to be the culprit, but collectively they are. They make it an environment where businesses can thrive and do what they do best, and as a result of that, you see businesses prosper and you see people going back to work. Nothing short of the economy turning and businesses creating jobs is going to solve the unemployment problem. You've got to create jobs, and to do that you have to look to the business sector, and to do that we have to make sure that we're promoting pro-business agenda items, which we are in our agenda this year as well.
What can you do, though, to promote job growth throughout the state? Because when you look at the job growth we have, it's been in very specific markets. You have some other places in North Carolina that have 1 out of 4, 1 out of every 5 workers out of a job. And they've been out of a job for 12, 18, some 24 months with no prospects of anything changing in their county.
Well, I mean, some of it goes to infrastructure, some of it goes to the structure of tax codes and tax policy. We talked earlier this morning, we're looking at education funding, because every single district is funded different educationally, and the local tax and millage rates are different all across the state. That impacts businesses. There are tons of reasons that businesses look to locate in certain regions. Some of them, they look for rail and interstate access and port and other things, and for others it is workforce and educational opportunities. And so all of the things are part and parcel. It's not one thing you can do to say it's going to make the state equality, because there are different things that different businesses deem important. And so you have to work on those arenas, as we are, as many of them as you possibly can. And then, rising tide raises all ships. So as the state picks up, everybody should pick up.
And in last year's Economic Development Competitiveness Act, the bill that we passed late in the session last year, that addressed some of the disparities in the way that incentives can be offered around the state, giving rural areas a little better opportunity, so that that's the areas that you're talking about when you bring that up, to give rural areas a little better incentives so that they can try have an advantage in their attempt to recruit business and industry. Because most of the urban suburban areas have a natural advantage, so we've tried to, in that legislation, help give some advantage to the rural areas as well. All right, well, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.